Okay, he's Nick, I'm Joe, and you are in the Combat Zone, live Wednesday night from Studio B underground in an underground, I just said that, location somewhere in the nation's capital. And I'm still Joe and he's still Nick. And I am really happy to be here today. Let's just start off the show with a simple apology. We did not post online the podcast, the recording of last week's show, because when we listened to it after, we realized, or at least I realized, how bad the audio from Israel, where I was. So we just figured, okay, that's really not up to our high perfecting standards. And Nick is just staring at the computer screen, and I'm
just waiting for you to finish the introduction.
Oh, okay. So there it is. Anyway, great to be back. Although, you know, I have to tell you, it's what time is it now? It's 7. It's 9 a.m. No, it's. I haven't
He's still
even
suffering
had any,
from jet lag.
I haven't even had any alcohol yet. Well, no, 2 or 3 sips, maybe of some apple cider or something. It's 9 p.m. here in Ottawa,
right?
Eastern time. So that's 7 hours difference. So let's see, 9 and 7 is 16. So that would make it 4 a.m.
Now let me ask you something. In Europe, do they mess around with the daylight savings time?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I thought so too.
I honestly don't know whether or not they changed the times. Somebody could call in and tell us that.
Yeah, absolutely.
844-415-2115, or you can chat online as well.
Yeah, and don't forget, if you go to thecombatzone.ca, there is the chat feature. All you got to do is register or log in, and it's easy. Even I did it, and you can leave comments there once you've done that. You know what the chat bubble looks like.
Yeah, just click on the talk bubble on the player.
That's right.
And then it'll prompt you to log in. And if you haven't logged in, just register. And yeah, there it is.
Yeah. And then you can tell us that way if you don't want to call. If you're shy, if you're reserved, I'm trying to think of polite ways to say, no, I'm not even going to say, you know what? Whatever reason you want to call in is a good enough reason for me. So by all means, if you want to call in, you can. If you want to use Facebook, I'm monitoring Facebook. So if you want to go to my webpage and private message me a comment or make comments on in general on the Facebook page that apply to the show, I'll either read them out or respond to them. And Joseph will do the same thing with the chat room. So one way or the other, we have all kinds of different ways of communicating with you. Now, first, before we get into the meat of the show, I wanted, because last week didn't go as well as we had hoped that it would, internet connections being what they were.
That was awful.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad it was. I just want to say this, okay? Nick, if it was that bad, you could have cut me off, okay? Because I would not have felt bad going back to bed.
Yeah.
Because it's like I get up at 3:30 in the morning so that I could do this show live.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going,
But there was a whole novelty of the thing. I didn't want to ruin that.
I couldn't even get back to sleep afterwards.
Well, after doing an exciting show like that, who could?
Yeah, well, it's...
Anyway, so what I thought we'd do is just do a brief summary of your trip overseas and some of the things, the highlights, if you want, the things that jumped out at you.
Okay, so, I'm just thinking highlights. Well, first of all, I have to tell you, the heat was very intense in Europe the whole time we were there. So we were in Europe for 2 weeks, and we did a little bit of traveling. We did a number of business meetings, and we attended a symposium/conference in Vienna for about 5 days. And the heat was really bad. And, you know, air conditioning is not anywhere near as prevalent as you would have thought. That's the first thing. Like the facilities that we were in for the symposium in Vienna had no air conditioning.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. And it was really nice. They were nice. It was a nice place.
Yeah.
But no air conditioning. And a lot of the stores, no air conditioning. Restaurants, no air conditioning. So it was, the joke is that after 2 weeks in Europe, we flew to Israel and spent a week in Israel. We had a number of meetings there. And the joke is that we flew to Israel to escape the heat.
Was it really cooler in Israel than it was in
Yeah,
Europe?
it really was. It really was. The highs, well, where we were, when we went up north, we spent one night in Tveria, which is where I did the show from with the crappy internet connection. So I should say, rather than I did the show from, I tried to do the show from, and it was hot there. And it was hot, but most of the time we were in Jerusalem. And the highs were, 29, 30, 31 degrees.
Yeah.
And it's higher up in the mountains a little bit. So the heat, it's a drier heat.
Right.
And the evenings were always cool, 16, 17, 18 degrees. So no matter how hot it is during the day, you can open the windows at night and get some relief. But even though it's hot during the day, it's a dry heat, so it's easier to take. For me anyway, it's the humidity that really gets me.
A lot of people are that way, and I'm one of them.
But I want to tell you, okay, you're asking me a couple of things that highlights from the trip. And the first one I have to tell you is we spent a few days in Krakow, and while we were there, I had never visited Auschwitz,
right.
The concentration camp, which is just outside of Krakow, a little ways outside. I'm not going to go into that, but I just, because people go, well, you were in Krakow, you must have gone to Auschwitz. I did. First time that I've done that. I was previously, I visited Dachau. And so anyway, that's an interesting experience. I was surprised at how difficult it was to find the camp. It was very difficult to find the camp. Yeah, it was. There were a lot of side streets and small villages and that. But once we got there, did a tour, and then we spent the weekend in Krakow at some friend's place. And what was really interesting was on the Sunday before we left to go back to Vienna. Somebody recommended that we do a tour of a salt mine, and I should have thought about this before about having the name, but if you look up Krakow on the internet and then salt mine, you'll come across the name of it's a little town outside of Krakow. And I remember when I was suggested to us that we do this salt mine tour, I'm thinking, okay, I've done the mine tours, okay, I've done up in what is it? Sudbury and that.
Kirkland Lake and all that.
What's the big deal, okay?
Right.
But it was recommended, and my colleague, my friend, traveling companion, thought, okay, yeah, I want to try it out. Let's see what it is. So we went into this salt mine, and Nick, I have to tell you, it was the biggest surprise. It was spectacular, because what they've done is they don't mine salt there anymore, but what the workers over this place has been mined for centuries.
Right.
And over time, the workers built these little chapels in the mine where they dug out, and they put up these salt statues. So there are chapels, and some of them are small, and some of them are really large, where they actually have services, daily service masses, and on Sunday people go down into the mine to attend church. And then they've got other caverns or other chambers that they've dug out and decorated really nicely, and turned into conference facilities. And there's a banquet room there underground, like about 1,000 feet underground, in a salt mine, and a restaurant and a nice restaurant, and gift shops and everything, all underground, man. It was. All I could think of was the Poles understand capitalism, because when they couldn't make money mining salt anymore out of this mine, okay,
they didn't walk away from it.
They didn't walk away from it and abandon it. Okay, it was not like this. Okay, we're going to take people down so that they get a sense of how hard it is to mine. There was a little bit of that, okay, but they've turned this into a real tourist, not just a tourist attraction, but a go-to place. So we were saying, okay, man, if we want to have a conference on capitalism.
This is the place.
And a free market. This is the place we should do it. We get people to come to Krakow. They're going to go, it's fun. So that was one big highlight. The second one I have to tell you is, and this is going to sound a little strange because, being Jewish and everything, why would I do this? Okay. But while we're driving around in that area, after our conference in Vienna, we're about an hour outside of Salzburg. And so we're driving into Salzburg. I'm looking at the map and I go, okay, we should really check out the Eagle's Nest, which is it was the mountaintop restaurant that was built as a birthday present for Adolf Hitler.
Yes, it was where he spent a lot of time up in the mountains.
Yeah, and it's still there. It's under private ownership now. They've turned it into a restaurant. So tens of thousands of tourists go there, not because it's a shrine to National Socialism in Germany or Adolf Hitler, but because it's a restaurant and the views are spectacular. Now, I didn't go up there because it was the restaurant or anything like that, obviously, right? But I thought, okay, that's, you can't get any closer. So I went up there just to see, and I have to tell you, I was struck by the normalcy of it. This views are spectacular. They don't hide from their Nazi past. Okay, they talk about it. When you're going up, you can't drive up yourself. It's a little mountain track road on the edge of the cliffs, right? You know the stuff you see in movies, right? Where if you lean over the side of the bus too much, you're
down
worried
the side
about the bus flipping over. Okay, going down the cliff, 5,000 feet. Seriously, it was like something like 8,000 feet or something. So you have to take the bus up, and it's a 20-minute ride. And then what do you do? Then you have to take the gold-plated elevator.
Gold-plated?
Yeah, gold-plated elevator up another how many hundreds of feet, and then they let you out in the restaurant area in the building. So when you're taking the tour bus up, they talk about the history of this place and what have you, and so nobody hides from its Nazi past, but nobody is going up there because it's a shrine to National Socialism.
Well, now
they're going up there to sit around and have hamburgers and hot dogs and that outdoors.
And just enjoy the view.
And enjoy the view.
Well, that's the reason why they picked that spot for the Eagles. Now, I'm trying to think of the name of the place. It's called the Eagle's Nest.
Well, that restaurant or that building is the Eagle's Nest.
Right.
It's the town nearby down
below
is Obersalzberg.
Okay.
Sorry, Berchtesgaden.
That's it.
Berchtesgaden.
I couldn't. Berchtesgaden. Right. I was on the tip of my tongue, but the assault on that at the end of the war was the only time in World War II when Germans and Allies fought on the same side. There was a German, I'm going to say company, and an American company who assaulted it to take out the last of the most fanatic SS who were still holding on to it, and they fought on the same side. It's the only time during the war that the two opposing sides came together to defeat the last vestiges.
Well, if you've ever seen the series, the miniseries Band of Brothers,
yes.
So it was actually that company, Easy Company of the whatever
101st Airborne.
101st Airborne, was it the 101st or the 500?
101st or 82nd?
I can't remember. 82nd, I think it was. But anyway, but they were the ones that actually took the Eagle's Nest. So it was interesting because on the flight back to Canada, to the United States the other day, I was watching Band of Brothers. It was one of the things that was available.
Yeah.
And I didn't remember this because it was the second time I'd seen the series. And in the last episode, they actually do, and they're walking around up there, and I'm going, okay, man, I know that. I was right. I was just there. Anyway, so let me just put the capping on this,
right.
Okay, to finish it off, Nick. So you want to know what the big thing was for me? I peed in Hitler's toilet. So I can't say that it was on my bucket list. It was not one of those things I thought to myself, I really want to do. But while we were there, okay, fine.
Given the chance, why wouldn't you?
Why wouldn't you, right?
That's right.
There it is. So
all right.
That's those were two very interesting things.
All right. Well, with that, I wanted to jump into. I dropped my list. Where is it? Here it is.
You have a list?
Of course I have a list.
Okay.
You think I have lists. You should see my wife's lists. Holy smokes. She's got lists. My wife is a very firm believer in lists. And she loves say, okay, we got to make a list. And she likes to be organized. Well, okay. And she'll put up a list of chores like for the kids to do. The problem is we're running out of kids at home. So a lot more of these things are beginning to slide under Dad's part of the list. Anyway, so
my wife likes lists too, by the way.
Yeah,
she stays organized that way.
Is it a woman thing, or is it just a certain personality type?
Nick, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole.
See, he noticed the bait on the water and said, "I'm not touching that." Anyway, what I wanted to get into, you've heard about the comments by our illustrious leader in Quebec, where there was...
We have an illustrious leader in Quebec?
No, he was in Quebec. Our illustrious leader, the used sock salesman, the prime minister.
Our illustrious leader?
Yeah, the used sock salesman.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the only job he's really qualified for. Anyway.
No, he's a drama teacher too. Which means
he was.
Which means I understand that, but let's be fair, okay? That means he's had many, many years of taxpayer-subsidized education in our universities.
Not really.
He's gone to college, teachers' college.
Didn't finish.
He must have finished. How could he teach?
He's Trudeau.
No. Come on. Really? He must have finished. I can't believe that.
If he's got anything, it's a bachelor's in BS.
Okay, but he still had to go to teachers' college.
You know what?
I'm not saying this to praise him or anything like that.
No.
And quite the opposite fact. I think, okay, he spent so much time in university.
I got it right here.
Okay, Nick's looking this up. He's not. He's on the computer.
Yep. We're going to have a look at, let's see, spouse party education. University of BC, 1998. McGill University, 94. McGill University College Jean de Brebeuf. So let me go to, and this is from Wiki. So, the good old-fashioned, ever-reliable Wiki. They would never lie, right?
No, but, some people might lie on that.
Well, that is also true. Okay, let's look at, come on, education, childhood, university, and early career. Okay. He has a Bachelor of Arts degree in literature from McGill University and a Bachelor of Education degree from the University of BC. In his first year at McGill, Trudeau became acquainted with his future Principal Secretary, Gerald Butts. Where have we heard that name before? Through their mutual friend, Jonathan Ablett. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. But the bottom line is apparently he does have a degree from McGill and a bachelor's from the University of BC. So, okay, you're right. He graduated. I'm being hard on him.
Of course, what does that mean? He graduated with a
liberal arts
degree
is becoming like a high school diploma. I mean, I'm not putting down high school diplomas, but they don't have the value they used to.
Well, that's true.
So that's when somebody says, "Well, I've got a BA."
So what did our illustrious leader? Sorry, what did your illustrious leader?
Whether I like it or not,
I missed it. I've been away for 3 weeks. The only I will say this. Okay, like the controversy that kept on popping up.
Right.
First of all, a lot of people know about and were very pleased with Justin Trudeau standing up to the Saudis on human rights. I heard that from a lot of people, interestingly enough.
But Joseph, okay, before I get into this story, here's what drives me crazy about that. Okay, so he stood up to the Saudis. When's he going to stand up to Iran? Iran's far worse. Well, far worse. But the kingdom of Saud is slowly moving towards the West in a very halting, stumbling kind of way. Okay, they are trying to make reforms. Women can drive now. They've pulled the teeth on a lot of the religious police authority. They're doing things that 10 years ago would have been fantasy. So, now, are they doing everything right? Of course not. But the last thing the young crown prince in Saudi Arabia needed was for Canada to smack him upside the head and say, "We think you're terrible people."
Yeah, in fairness to your illustrious leader, I'm going to use that against you all the time now, Nick. Okay.
Yeah. Well,
in fairness to your illustrious leader,
he's yours too.
Prime Minister.
Whether
No,
you like it
he's
or not.
Okay, he's doesn't work quite that way. But anyway, unless you're well, okay, I won't get into that. I don't. It was not the original tweet criticizing the Saudi government on human rights. Did not come from the Prime Minister's office, and it did not come from.
I'm sorry.
It was
That doesn't wash.
Of course, this is the way it works. It's some low level or mid level bureaucrat tweeted, and then once the Saudis reacted, then it became an issue that the Minister of Foreign Affairs got involved with, and eventually the Prime Minister.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What's the name of the navigator on the Titanic?
Who cares? I don't know.
What's the name of the captain?
I don't know.
E.D. Smith.
So what's your point?
My point is nobody cares about the navigator, even though the helmsman would be the better person to name, because the captain goes down with his ship. He's responsible ultimately for whatever happens on his watch. And the Prime Minister has the same responsibility, especially in foreign affairs.
Okay, I'm not exonerating him, or
I know that. I understand that. But this is why I don't buy that argument.
Flap didn't. It was not Trudeau was going out and attacking Saudi Arabia. That was not what happened originally. It was a tweet.
So if you're right, okay, if he didn't condone that view, then why didn't he come out and say, "Look, Freeland misspoke. There was a mistake. We apologize."
Oh, because this is good for him. You and I have talked about this before. I don't remember now if it was last week, but this is a good issue for Justin Trudeau, because he gets to go out there, he gets to portray himself as being a great defender of human rights, of women's rights. This fits his brand hand in glove.
He's a full-blown hypocrite. Anyway, okay, so that's you and I.
A liberal hypocrite. Shocking.
I know, shocking. Yes, I know. Hard to believe. A political hypocrite.
Okay, yeah, that's probably more accurate.
Yeah, because they're not unique.
No, that's true.
Let's be fair.
Lately, I've run into a few conservative hypocrites.
Yes, it's not just one or the other. They come in all different stripes and colors. Anyway, but he's out in Quebec, and he's out at some kind of agricultural event, and he's giving a little stump speech. And in the middle of the stump speech, this lady who's standing in the crowd heckles him and says, "When are you going to give Quebec the $200 million you owe us?" And he goes, your attitudes and fear-mongering are not acceptable here in Canada.
Right, the $200 million with respect to...
The money from... Okay, let me flesh that out. Yes, that's money that the Quebec government has spent at the border trying to control the immigration crisis. Okay? And both Ontario and Quebec have asked him in open letters where that money is. All she did was repeat it. She got called a racist. She got roughed up by the RCMP. Trudeau went up to him and says, "You're a racist." I can't say the French word. I'm not going to butcher it. Called her a racist 2 or 3 times as he walked by her in the crowd. How prime ministerial is that? He should have either ignored her or answered the question. But he didn't do either. He called her a racist for asking a question about economics. Where's the money? It's not our fault. We didn't say, "Well, come to Canada, here's the doormats open." You did. So why aren't you paying for it? That's not racist. That's asking him to pay for what he caused.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
So that was the issue. So now, today, everybody, according to, when you're listening to the different media outlets, it seems that if you ask any question of this Liberal government, you are threatened with the possibility of being called a racist, a bigot, and a homophobe or xenophobe or whatever phobe they want to throw at you. Like if I were to go to the Prime Minister or the Minister of Defense and say, "Why is it taking so long? And why is it going to cost $60 billion to rebuild the Canadian Navy? You're a racist. You're a homophobe." That kind of attitude is not acceptable. Because what they're doing is they don't want to answer the question. So in order to avoid answering the question, they just completely attack the character of someone they don't know. Because nobody knew this woman before she ever asked him that question, and now they're looking at their Facebook page and all kinds of nonsense, like that mattered at the time. He could have said, look, madam, I hear you. We're not here for that today, but we'll deal with that. We'll get you an answer soon or whatever. He could have done whatever he wanted to, but to call her names publicly was just absolutely disgusting and disgraceful. And, well, again, we're talking Trudeau, so it's not all that hard to believe.
But not just Trudeau, Nick. This is the default reaction. I want to say of the left, okay, but it's. I don't know if it's fair to call it left wing, right wing entirely. I think it predominates on the left, obviously, but this is the younger people today they're indoctrinated with this notion of there's racism in everything, there's homophobia in everything. You can't make a legitimate criticism. You can't question anything. If you do, if you're not completely towing the line on whatever the fad of the day is, whatever the flavor of the day is, then somehow or other you're a racist, or you're a homophobe, or you're a bigot, or you're a misogynist, or you're a male chauvinist pig.
Yeah,
that's what they used to call these guys, in the '60s, right? You're a male chauvinist pig.
Oh yeah, now we're dating ourselves.
Well, I'm dating you anyway. Well, no, hold it. Hold it.
Are you sure about that?
Yeah, hold it. I take that back. Oh, hold it. I better be careful. That might have been a homophobic statement on my
No, I don't think...
getting into... But you see, now listen, we're laughing, okay? But really, that's what ends up, how you end up getting into trouble. And then you back off and you go, okay, no, I didn't really mean that. And then people go, oh, he's a racist, he's a homophobe. I mean, this is the thing: is how do you can't even talk anymore. It's very frustrating. Goodness gracious me!
It's a very terrifying trend, because one of the bedrocks of a modern society, of a modern democracy, whatever fashion it is, whether it's a Republican democracy like we have, or what's the representative democracy like we have, or a democracy like the Americans have, where there's some subtle differences between the two. When you have elected officials who not only refuse to answer questions, but begin to shout down criticism, we're on a very, very dangerous road.
Well, yeah, and you have to allow freedom of speech, because freedom of speech is the fundamental right
of all of them.
Of all of them, because if you can't have free speech, how do you criticize the government of the day? You can't criticize the government of the day. You can't criticize the social norms of the day. So freedom of speech is it's fundamental. It's absolutely the most basic right, I think, in any political system, and any free political system. So it's been badly attacked in this country, and not just in this country, around the world. And, we just spent, like I said, 2 weeks in Europe, and there's a very real and growing frustration with this kind of thing in Europe. And you're going to see more and more reaction to it, I think.
And I think that what's going on here in Canada and the United States, let's call it North America, there is that sense, too. We might not be quite as far down that path, but I think that as Europe comes apart at the seams and we watch what's going on over there, this is why I was so interested in what you were experiencing personally. I know you only saw a very tiny sliver of the whole continent. By no means could you talk to everybody, but to take a little sampling like that to get people's attitudes was very interesting to me, because what's going on there is headed our way if we don't get a handle on that. So I thought that would be a great place to start. So in other words, just to finally finish up with this whole thing about the lady being called the racist, I hope she goes after the RCMP and takes every legal recourse she can for what was done to her, because her character has been besmirched. She was physically assaulted by the RCMP bodyguard around. She posed no threat, uttered no threat, was no threat. She's a 70-year-old grandmother. I mean, for crying out loud, how much of a threat could she be?
You're not wrong, Nick. You're not wrong. Let's take our first break.
Yep.
And we're going to be back in a couple of minutes.
Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. I'm Nick. He's Joe. He's fresh back from overseas, and we have a fair amount of content left to go. So, by all means, we're going to dig right in. I just wanted to use that last segment, Joseph, if we can, to segue into what I think. Let's talk about what a healthy immigration policy would look like in a reasonably well-run modern country. Because it's one thing to rail about the situation as we see it today with irregular, otherwise known as illegal immigration, pouring over our borders at the rate of 30,000 people a year, or whatever the number is now. It's one thing to get upset and bent out of shape about that, but it's another to have an answer. Now, the answer to the illegal side is just enforce the law. Shut down the illegal border crossings where you find them, and start spreading the word that you have to cross at a regular border crossing and be vetted like everybody else, or you have to get in the immigration queue. So let's with that's the one side. But the other side is, what does, in your mind, a well-run immigration policy look like in a reasonably well-run country?
Well, the first thing is, I think we have to be very much aware that what we celebrate, I think, with great justification, the longest undefended border between two countries in the world, between Canada and the United States.
That's right.
So really, it's virtually impossible for us to stop illegal immigration. Okay,
we should stop encouraging it, though.
No, I don't disagree with you.
Yep.
Okay, don't encourage it, but let's be realistic. It's really, if people want to flood across the border, they're going to do it, and we simply don't have the resources to stop it. So let's just understand that right from the word go. The real problem, as I see it, is that, first of all, when we have an agreement that the United States is a safe country, and nobody, and I mean this, I don't mean a few people, I mean nobody, zero, nobody should be coming into this country from the United States and making a refugee claim, whether they're coming from the United States or they're coming from another country. If they land in the United States and they come to a Canadian border and they cross the Canadian border and they say, I'm a refugee, okay, so the law here is you have to, and not just the law here, we have treaty obligations as well. Mm-hmm. So we have to process that refugee. In other words, we have to give them a fair hearing. So I say streamline the process and make it very clear that if you're coming from the United States, and that's what the evidence shows, that you came from the United States, you go back to the United States and you make your refugee claim there, because you cannot land in a safe country and then come to Canada and say, my life is in danger. From where? From the United States? It's nonsense, okay? So no refugee claim should be valid if you're coming into Canada from the United States. So to me, that's the first thing. But that's refugees. That's not immigration.
Right.
And, I'm sick to death of people talking about the fact that when you say, I support legal immigration, people go, you're anti-immigrant. That's absurd. It's just crazy. So, of course, we're not anti-immigrant. We're not pro-immigrant. But we'd like to see, I think, a sane, as you're suggesting, carefully thought out immigration policy. What does that look like? Well, I don't know what it looks like in terms of numbers, but I think I know what it looks like in terms of functionality. And that is to say, where are the areas that we need people to come in? Do we need construction workers? Do we need doctors or nurses? Do we need electricians? Do we need skilled labor? Whatever it is that our economic needs are, that's what we should be targeting in terms of immigration. And so when people apply to come to this country, there are two things. First of all, they should be able to show that they meet the needs of the country, number one. And number two, they ought to go through a proper vetting process before they get here in order to determine whether or not they're going to be security risks, and I'm saying that writ large, okay?
Right.
Are they going to integrate into the larger community? And I say integrate, I don't say assimilate. I don't mind multiculturalism. I don't mind natural. Organic
There's a huge difference, yes.
And in the context of natural and organic, people assimilate. That's just the norm. But if you don't assimilate, that's fine too, as long as you're not disrupting the broader community in the fact that you're isolating yourself to a certain degree. But from a security point of view, there should be a proper vetting process at the front end, meaning before they come here. I do not agree, Nick, that the Canadian taxpayers should spend a single penny educating anybody who comes into this country on Canadian values and teaching them what it means to be a Canadian. I think that sure, maybe history, maybe civics courses, maybe that kind of the practical stuff, language, etc. But values, I think that people who come to this country should want to come to this country and live here because they already have those values. And I know people hate the word values. It's one of those tossed away words. But I think you know what I'm saying, right? Uh-huh. You have to come. Why should taxpayers spend a single penny teaching people that honor killing is bad? If you believe that honor killing is an acceptable thing, then why did you get let into this country in the first place? That is something that should have been determined before they even let you get on a plane to come here. So it's our system, I think, is, I hesitate to use the word out of control, but there are significant problems with it. For sure there are.
Now, you mentioned language because that was tossed around a lot today in the media. Under the Harper government, they tried to bring back the idea that you have to, when you come here, no matter where you come from, you should have a reasonable command of one of the two official languages. And that under the present regime, they're trying to water that down. So, no, you don't. Like, if you come here and you speak Cantonese or you speak Punjabi or you speak Icelandic, I don't care, whatever country you come from, if it's not a native English-speaking language and you can't speak either English or French, and don't worry about it, come on in. We'll that doesn't matter. Because to me, what that does is it causes people to gravitate towards those who are like themselves, coming from where they came from. In other words, it creates. I don't want to. I hesitate to use the word ghetto, but it causes them to congregate in areas where they feel comfortable, which is understandable. It's human nature.
Sure.
But it doesn't do anything to help them. Even blending in isn't the right word, but just become part of the greater Canadian fabric.
Right. Look, personally, I don't care whether people speak English or French before they come here. Perhaps it's helpful that they do, and maybe that should be something that they get more points in the point system for, and in fact they do. But, when my father came to this country, he couldn't speak English, and he learned English here. The key here is that you have to learn the language.
Yeah, I guess to be more clear, that's what I was driving at. I don't mean to say that if you come here speaking, Antarctican, then okay, you can come in, but you have to show that you're making the effort to learn the English language.
Is there a language Antarctican?
That's why I picked it. There is no unless you're a penguin. There is no language from Antarctica.
It's funny because when you said that, I pictured penguins.
Yeah.
And I was going to make a penguin noise, but then I thought, I don't even know what penguins sound like.
Neither do I. I've never heard one.
So, look, I want to use Germany as an example here to talk about this because Germany has a great reputation, especially after a few years ago when there was a large migrant refugee crisis in Europe,
right?
And people were coming to Germany not by the boatload because they're okay, but by the train load, literally.
They were coming in their tens of thousands.
Okay, there were lots of people, and the Germans were accepting them because they were making refugee claims.
Right.
So the Germans were accepting them as refugees, and then they would go through the refugee claimant process, and then a whole bunch of them got shipped back where they came from because they weren't legitimate refugees, okay? They from their home country, if they were coming from Syria or they coming from Kurdistan or Iraq or some of the, they're legitimate refugees in that sense, but what they were doing was they were ending up in safe countries, and then they were moving out of the safe countries to Germany because in Germany it's a better economy and
better welfare net,
there's a better social safety net, etc. So naturally people are going to go. This is why people want to come to Canada. Some people want to come to Canada because they're fleeing whatever they're fleeing, but if you're going to go to the States. And you think, I'm going to make it great here. And there's a lot of great things in the United States economically with a free market, et cetera, freer market than there is here. But, let's face facts. The minute you start looking at healthcare costs, et cetera, you could start to get a little intimidated. And then you look across the border and go, oh, look at there. They've got free healthcare, quote unquote, so-called free healthcare. I'm going to go there. So there are a lot of things that attract people to Canada that have nothing to do with whether or not they're looking for a safe place to land. It's just that the social safety net here is better. So same in Germany. So lots of people end up going to Germany, but a lot of those guys ended up getting shipped right back after they went through the process, and nobody ever talked about that. But here's the other thing, and it's relevant to the trip that we just had because we talked to people about this, and it turns out that in Germany, if you're a refugee or an immigrant or whatever it is, if you're accepted to live there, you must do certain things as part of being allowed to live there, okay, as a newcomer. You must be in language school, okay? You don't have to learn the language, but you're going to learn the language if you're in the language school.
That's the whole point.
So it's not that, you have to learn English or French or German, okay? No, you have to be in school learning that language. You have to register with the local employment office. You have to be actively looking for a job or working. There are a number of items that you have to tick off. And as a new immigrant or as an accepted refugee, okay, if you're not ticking those boxes off, they ship you out. Okay, there's no such thing as, I'm here now and so I don't have to learn German. No. You have to learn German. If you're not in school learning German, out you go. And so, in a sense, there's this perception that the Europeans are far more accepting and tolerant and wrapping their arms and hugging new immigrants, etc. They are, but they're doing it under certain conditions. You don't just get a free ride. Here, you get much more of a free ride. The whole notion that people come here and then you're going to go, will they go to school and learn English or French or whatever? I mean, that question just doesn't arise in Europe.
Well, first of all, when people come and make an asylum or a refugee claim, there's a very high percentage that once they get through the first hearing are never seen again. They just disappear.
Yeah, that's absolutely true as well. And that's a problem as well. Enforcement is a very big problem. And just the length of time, the fact that it's unconscionable, frankly, that you have a 1 or 2 or 3 year dragging out the process. It's not right. So this is why I said streamline the process for refugees, and frankly, streamline the process for actual immigrants, the people who apply.
Doug Ford did something recently that I thought you might be able to make some use of, or take the example he set up in order to deal with this issue and tailor it to immigration. He set up SWAT teams in the courthouses to deal with gun violence and gang members and make sure hardened criminals don't get back on the streets. So if you look at that and say, how can we apply that kind of mindset to immigration? Why not have special not prosecutors, but I don't even know if judges and prosecutors are the right terminology, but you know what I mean. A special office or a special judiciary process to handle nothing but refugee or immigration and refugee claims in an expedited way to clear up the backlog, so that the real immigrants who are in the queue waiting for sometimes decades to get into the country can have their wait shortened dramatically, and we can get the people that we're really interested in the country and not have to deal so much with false refugee claims and ferret them out and ship them back wherever they came from. If it's back to the U.S., fine, but just not here, okay, and speed that process up. Do you see that fitting in somewhere?
Well, sure, but we do have the refugee claims are dealt with in their own tribunals. There already is a separate system for adjudicating refugee claims, and but of course, what ends up happening is that people don't show up, or there's just this big backlog, or once the refugee board has made a decision. Can people then apply to the regular courts for judicial reviews and et cetera, et cetera? So the process is long and drawn out. And it gets to the point where somebody comes to the country, makes a refugee claim, and you know, they could be in the system for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years before there's a final decision. Of course, by that time, and we've seen cases of this where the people who made the original claim did it in good faith, okay? They weren't trying to scam the system. But then their claim is finally rejected. There's no more, they hit the wall, there's nothing. And in the meantime, they've gotten married, they have a job,
kids,
a home, they have children. What happens to them then? So this is what I say is waiting, drawing the process out is in fact what is cruel. What we should have is we should have a much faster, much more streamlined process, and you know, just get on with it.
Couldn't agree with you more, because this, you know, I guess if you're looking at it from that way, if you pull a wall as you describe it forward and say, look, first of all, you get one shot at a judicial appeal if we give them any, because we have the right to decide if there are going to be any appeals to a tribunal decision, whether somebody is an actual refugee or not, and spare the taxpayer the cost and the refugee the agony of going through 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years of all this stuff, and have somebody finally say, no, I'm sorry, you're going back. Now you got the family and everything you just described. So we pulled that wall up and said, look, you get one judicial review, and if it goes against you, you'll be out of the country in 60 days.
But it's not just getting your one
it's a
review.
lot more humane.
It's how long it takes to do it. And, you know, this is a separate subject altogether. I know it's nothing that we wanted to talk about tonight, but it's worth doing a whole segment on this, and that is the inefficiency of the judicial system in this country. And, you know, maybe we're not unique in this respect, but just speaking about the Canadian judicial system and the Ontario judicial system, it's just unbelievable how archaic, old, just inefficient that the system is. And the process is terribly expensive, drawn out. I can't say enough bad things. I cannot say enough bad things about our legal system. I really can't.
You know, it's. I know you've done this before, where you've had this kind of tongue-in-cheek thing about the, how did you put it? The Dragnet kind of theme music you play in the background.
Oh, the Law and Disorder.
Law and Disorder.
Yeah.
This is the judges and the lawyers who set them free or something like that. These are their stories. You know, we should really explore that at some time and see if maybe there's something there we could work with, because I think people need to be made aware of just how badly flawed the whole system is. Yeah,
it's just so inefficient. I'm not even going to get into it now, because that's a subject for a whole evening,
show,
Nick.
yeah.
I've got to tell you about it. We can get people here talking about horror stories about how much just basic legal stuff is costing. Pardon me?
Look at Family Court.
Well, sure, Family Court.
Oh my God! Some of the horror stories that come out of that place. I mean, it never ends. So maybe we'll do that sometime in the future. We'll dedicate a show to the horror that the legal system in Canada has become.
Our number to call, by the way, in case if you want to get into the conversation, is toll-free anywhere in North America, 844-415-2115. I'll say that again, slower.
That's right. Slower. He can't write that fast.
844-415-2115. I'm feeling a little bit like Robin. Was it Robin Williams who played in Good Morning Vietnam?
Yes. One of his greatest roles.
I don't know. I couldn't take. It was that movie was all Robin Williams.
Absolutely.
It was just it was him. That was his movie. And it was all about everything that he does, or did, I should say, as Robin Williams.
But that was based on a true story. Like the
that's
character,
what I understand. Yeah,
yeah. And he just took it and just ran with it. So I really enjoyed it. It's a lot of heavy, salty language in it, but he just that's when you really noticed Robin Williams. So anyway,
Mork.
Yeah,
Mork from Ork.
You know, it's funny when I say. Fly and be free. Nobody gets it. That's him throwing an egg in the air because on his planet, eggs fly.
Right.
So he walked over to the fridge, grabbed an egg, threw it in the air, and said, "Fly and be free." Splat.
Yeah, Mork and Mindy. For those who aren't familiar with that show,
yeah, that was
Mork and Mindy.
What year would that have been? Back in the late '80s?
I think it was even before that.
Mid '80s.
I think it was. I could be wrong, but I think it was even late 70s.
He had the Farrah Fawcett hair at the time.
Late 70s, I think it was.
Anyway, brilliant man. Tragic end. All right, but we got a couple minutes left. I just was thinking about this. By the way, I want to encourage you that we now have AJ has joined us in the chat room. So thank you for jumping in there, AJ. If anybody else wants to join AJ in the chat room and swap some comments back and forth.
Hey, AJ, I want to know why you're saying hi, Nick, and not hi, Joe.
Because I said hello.
Okay, well,
you said was welcome.
I'm feeling a little left out here, guys.
Anyway, you can go to www.
Come on, Nick. Get this right. thecombatzone.ca.
Yes, I'm getting there.
Okay. Click on the live player icon.
That's right.
Okay, and then click on the chat icon in the player.
And if you haven't previously logged in...
Yeah, it'll prompt you. Just follow the instructions.
Yeah, it's easy. Even I could do it.
Oh, there he goes. He says, hi, Joe. Hey, AJ.
See,
how's
he's
it going,
listening.
man?
He's paying attention.
Well, our listeners pay attention.
They do. They do. At least that one does. Yeah. Oh, man. I want one of the things when we come back from the next break.
Oh, we must be pretty close to the next break.
Well.
Oh, man. I think we're not. We're not
minutes.
quite there yet.
3-4 minutes.
Okay.
I know what
we need a big clock on the wall here in the bunker.
In the bunker,
Bunker
yes.
B.
You know what I wish I had was, remember the old brass clocks off the ships?
Okay.
One of those big old brass clocks.
I knew you were going to get into this.
Well, I got a ship's helm right there.
I know.
Anyway, and a propeller behind you. But
did you ever work with bunker oil?
No. They had fortunately gotten rid of that before we had furnace fuel oil. They still had the old bunker oil heaters, though, because you had to heat up to about 250 degrees before it would light. The stuff
it would flow.
This stuff was basically crude oil.
It was basically tar.
Yeah, pretty much. But when they switched the furnace, as you know, it's funny, and this has nothing. This is called in radio lingo filling, because we don't want to start a new topic with only about 3 minutes left before the break.
I think this is interesting. I think people are interested in this.
But I was watching a video tonight out of World War II about how to light an Admiralty boiler and how to prepare a ship to go to sea, the steam plant, the power plant. The part that I worked with, it was so cool because while the stuff they were using was older, I know it's hard to believe, than what I worked with, I could see that what we had, you could see it was the next generation after what they were working with. Okay, the boilers were more efficient in the ships that we were on compared to what the video showed. Now, the video was made in the early 1940s. So that's kind of cold comfort, but it brought back a ton of memories. And I'm watching them go through the flasher procedure, and he's talking about all these different equipment. I won't bore you with all the gory details. I don't want to get down into those kind of weeds, but everything from taking the funnel cover off to, all the different things that you had to do to get a ship ready. And I'm going, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I see what they're doing. And no, in your mind, you're going through it. It was cool. And when you showed up tonight, I actually had it up and watched almost all of it. And it's just fascinating to watch a steam plant come alive. If you've never had a chance to do that, to get around steam, it's just amazing. There's a place where you can actually go and see a Corvette's engine still in use today in Muskoka. They have a tour boat. It's long and narrow. Why it is, I don't know, but that's just the way they built it. And in it is a triple expansion steam engine out of a World War II Corvette. And they're very simple from an engine point of view. And I was looking through the glove, because you can see right into the engine when you're standing on the dock. And I was looking at it going, okay, so that's the high-pressure piston, that's the medium, that's the low. And people started to gather around it. And I gave a little bit of a verbal tour of what the engine did and all the different components. And guys are standing around, how do you know all this? I said, because I worked with this thing's grandchild. It's very basic and simple if you understand how steam plants work. So it was a lot of fun.
And Nick, I have to tell you, you have to be careful. I think in the current environment that we find ourselves in, politically correct, be careful talking about steam plants and how much you like them.
Why would I be worried about that?
Okay, I'm not even going to go there. I'm not even going to go there, Nick. Okay.
You know what? Maybe you can tell me over the break.
I don't know. Okay, we're about 30 seconds early, but we're gonna go for the break now because we for sure need a break. I think. Okay, this was, what did you call it? Filler?
That was called Phil. Yes,
Phil. It was
filler.
Phil. That's
AJ actually has a comment. He says, "Oh man, furnace oil. I owe a debt to that stuff as big as it is a big reason why I have what I consider a family heirloom today." Okay, so AJ, now you got to tell us what the heirloom is.
An oil furnace.
Furnace fuel oil?
Furnace fuel oil?
Furnace oil.
Okay, all right. Enough,
all right.
Phil. Okay, we're going for a break, okay? So we're going to be seeing you guys, well, actually, hopefully you'll be listening to us in a few minutes.
All right.
So take it easy, stretch your legs. We'll be back soon.
Okay, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. The number you can reach us at is 844-415-2115. We have the ability to speak to you that way. You can use the live chat like AJ's done. And just before the break, we were kind of chatting back and forth through the chat with AJ. And he was talking about an heirloom that he had, which turned out to be a furnace fuel oil pump that was in the Barry's Bay gas station for about, it was last used in 1960. His was it your grandmother? I'm just scrolling back. Let's see. She owned, great aunt. Okay, it was his great aunt owned the gas station in the Shell station in Barry's Bay for about 60 years. And this pump hadn't been used since 1960. Now, the pump in question was the furnace fuel oil pump, as I understand what great aunt, was the one that if you had an oil furnace in your home, this thing would fill the truck, and then the truck would bring the furnace fuel oil to you to heat your home with, if I understand what he's telling me correctly. All right, now, that's the wrap up on that. let's.
I just want to know though how we ended up talking about fuel oil and all
Because I was talking about the video, watching the lighting up of a steam destroyer from the Navy, from the Royal Navy. I'm sorry, filmed in the 1940s, and how similar it was to what I did when I was in the service. And we got talking about the fuel and all that stuff.
Okay,
that's how all that happened.
Okay, I just checking.
Yeah. See,
and where else? This is Canada's flagship conservative radio show.
When we say conservative, buddy.
Okay. All right, we should be back to the coal scuttle days.
Yeah, well, they're actually. Where did I?
Now I know what you're gonna. We're going to go to clean coal now.
Well, you brought it up.
I did.
I think it's in Alberta, where coal is actually cheaper than any other form right now.
Coal is making a comeback in Alberta.
So we won't go down that road.
You can order a ton of coal and heat your house with it.
You know what? If I could do that here, I probably would. Just for
you probably can. You should look into it. I'm not even joking about that. You should look into it. I wonder if you can get coal delivered to your farm, Nick, because you could for sure get coal-fired boilers.
Oh yeah, you can get them
now. But I don't. Do you heat with? I don't recall. Now remind me. Do you heat with hot water or hot air?
We have a propane furnace downstairs,
so it's hot air.
Hot air, forced air, and we also have 2 wood stoves. And
yeah. Well, wood stoves you could do coal in.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. And I don't know. You'd have to for your hot air. You'd have to get a. You could probably still use the same furnace, but you'd have to have... No, you don't burn the coal in it, though, which you'd have to have... Because I don't know that you could do any coal in a hot air
You could do an outdoor furnace, though.
Well, you could do an indoor furnace. It's still going to go up the chimney. The point is you have to have... I don't know if you can get a coal-fired hot air furnace. But what you can do is you can have a coal-fired boiler, and then you run... the water through a heat exchanger,
right?
Okay, in your hot air furnace,
right?
And that's how you get your
But
heat.
You could do it like you can have an outdoor furnace, right? And everybody around me who has them burns wood in them because that's the most readily available fuel source and is the cheapest of all the fuel sources. But if you could provide coal, let's say, because it would cost me to heat my house on wood. Over the course of the heating season, probably $1,000, because wood is now $80 to $100 a cord.
Yeah, you could heat on coal for a fraction of that.
Yeah, if that was the case, I'd do it.
And it's good, clean coal too. It's not.
This isn't.
But I don't know if you can get it here.
We're talking about here. This isn't Venezuelan crude we're talking about here.
No, it's definitely not.
No, and I say that because they have some of the dirtiest crude oil on the planet out of Venezuela.
But it's not oil, it's coal.
No, I get that, but it's fossil fuel.
The black stone.
Yes, I know.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we got that clear.
Yes.
Honestly, I don't know if you can get it in Ontario.
I don't know. But you know what? I'm going to look into it just because if I could do it, if I could get even at the same price, I'd do it anyway, just to flip my finger one last time at Kathleen Wynne and her nonsense around this energy issue.
Well, figuratively speaking, guys, Dick doesn't flip anybody the bird.
Well, not that I admit publicly. Once in a while. Anyway, with that aside, I want to get to... there's a movement in the States before we
move on.
Yes.
Let's move on to the movement.
Moving on. There's a movement in the United States. You've heard about everybody knows about the Me Too movement. What was the one before that? The Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, Me Too movement. Well, there's a new movement out of the States that is gaining a lot of ground really quickly. It's called the Walkaway movement. And what it is, in the United States, it's former Democrats who have had enough of the hysterical left and has simply walked away from it. A lot of them turn over to the Republicans or at least become conservatives because they find out they've been lied to for decades in some cases. When you watch some of the testimonial videos that I've been watching today, they say, we were told, Republicans were horrible people who wanted to clear-cut forests, eat kittens, and stomp on bird eggs. These kind of people, they were just terrible people. They were greedy, they were selfish, they didn't care about anybody. And we found out very quickly, once we left the Democratic Party, that's not true at all.
Yeah, but I just want to make it clear that I don't want to step on bird eggs, but but I wouldn't be averse to doing it if the alternative was, like what they did in Ottawa a couple of months ago with
if it's going to hold up a multi-million-dollar event, then I would have at least taken a scoop shovel and moved them, and I wouldn't have waited for anybody to come along and tell me to.
Okay, so just wanted to clarify that, guys.
Yeah, that's right. Anyways, the point is, this movement is gaining a lot of traction because a lot of people are so fed up with the hysterics, especially out of Hollywood with the Al Pacinos and Robert De Niro and the Damon what's his name DiCaprio and all these people, the Whoopi Goldbergs who think and Rosie O'Donnells who think they speak for everybody and they barely speak for themselves.
Does anybody know if Whoopi is her real name?
Who cares? I mean,
no,
I just
find it's such a strange name.
It is. There's
Whoopi.
No doubt about it could. I don't know. I've never.
Whoopi's running for president. Whoopi.
That would be about the end of it. She'd get Whoopi cushioned, all right.
Whoop-de-doo.
Yeah, that'd be about it.
Seriously. Now I have to be careful because somebody's going to claim that I'm being racist. I'm sure, but no, seriously. I'm just curious. Is that her real name?
We're going to find out.
Oh, I should have known better. Okay, Nick is Googling. Isn't it interesting? Okay, I should really be saying Nick is searching on the internet. Pardon me?
What's her last name? Goldberg?
Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg. It's interesting how these words creep into our lexicon, right?
Yeah.
So Nick is searching on the internet. I don't know why I said Googling. It could have been Binging or whatever, MSN. I don't even know what these are.
You want to know what her real name is?
What is it? Seriously.
Carolyn Elaine Johnson.
Get out.
Yep. Karen, sorry.
Karen.
Karen Elaine Johnson. So if you ever meet her, say hi, Karen.
Okay, there you go. Now that makes the whole show worthwhile.
Yeah, see, you learn something about
Karen Johnson.
Karen Johnson.
Hi, Karen
Born
Johnson.
November 13, 1955.
Karen Johnson is thinking about running for president. Have you heard? Have you heard of Karen Johnson?
Do you know she's been nominated for 13 Emmy Awards?
Well, look, I'm going to say this, okay? Give credit where it's due. She is an extremely successful and astute capitalist.
You know what? For all the rage she does about it, she's very good at making money.
Absolutely. And all the power to her for doing it.
Not arguing that.
I have no problem with Karen Johnson making as much money as she wants.
Whoopi Goldberg, on the other hand. Anyway,
why would she? Why Whoopi Goldberg? It just sounds.
Well, first of all, I don't know. Like, I can't look.
I get. All right, I get Adolf Hitler. Okay, I get Hitler taking Hitler instead of Schicklgruber, okay?
Yeah, okay, I get that. But and his relatives changing their names afterwards, I get that too. But
somebody's now going to complain that we're promoting Adolf Hitler and National Socialism. No. Oh, and by the way, if you guys out there, okay, National Socialism, got it? Socialism. National Socialism.
I am so tired of trying to explain to people that Hitler was a lefty. You wouldn't believe when you tell a lefty that, they come unglued. They just lose it.
100%. No, yep. It was not the Nazis were socialists. 100%.
Well, hey, look, when somebody said, "Well, then why did they fight the communists?"
I don't know why did the communists
fight anybody?
Why did the Russians and the Chinese fight a war?
Why did Japanese and Russians do it?
I don't know. It's
for crying out loud.
That's such a. I don't know. Sometimes people say things and it just leaves me speechless. You remember Art Linkletter's show?
Yes, I do.
Kids say the darndest things?
Yes.
Well, now it's millennials say the darndest things.
Yeah. What was that?
No, maybe that's not fair.
No,
sorry,
Maxine
now I'm going to be accused of being anti-millennial.
Maxine Waters had the best line going about millennials. She says, "I'm not a millennial anymore, but I used to be." Doesn't even know what the term means. Anyway, okay, so back to this idea. This walkaway movement was started by a gay guy who was a Democrat in the United States. And he rejects everything that the modern version of the Democratic Party represents. Bigotry, intolerance, racism, all these things that they now embrace. He says, I reject them all. And the more I began to dig into this, the more I thought I had a place to go, the more I found out that I was only comfortable until and as long as I agreed with them. The moment I started to go, well, wait a minute, what about that? All of a sudden, I was being called names and attacked. And nobody in the videos that I watched, and I watched about a half a dozen of them, which is by no means a lot, but enough to give you a sense. And none of them said it happened overnight. Some of them were generational Democrats. My dad, his dad before him, parents. We all voted Democrat. But I began to question some of this stuff. And the more looking into it I did, especially with the advent of the internet, then things began to change. And they just eventually hit the wall and said, I'm leaving. Now, not all of them have become Republicans. A lot of them have become independents. And speaking of that, Richard Dreyfuss was on with Tucker Carlson. I'll say recently, I posted it on Facebook. And he gave some, from a guy from Hollywood, he really surprised me with his depth of knowledge about the Constitution and his insistence that in civics and history must be taught again to the young people in schools, because it's not, and it hasn't been for over a decade. So there's a whole decade of kids out there who don't know the first thing about the Founding Fathers. They don't know anything about the Declaration of Independence or about the Bill of Rights or civics, how laws are made, those kinds of things.
Right, in the United States.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a whole lot different here.
Well, yeah, the Constitution is very different here. We don't have a Declaration of Independence.
That's true, but I mean, let's talk about civics. Like,
yeah, you're right. I agree with you.
Yep. So anyway, just a nod to Mr. Dreyfuss. That was not what I was expecting out of him. I expected more left-wing drivel. And he came out and said, look, I'm neither Republican nor Democrat. I'm an independent. I believe in the Constitution. And that's what makes this country great. Okay, hey, that's a completely reasonable point of view for an American to have. Anyway, so this walkaway movement is really gaining ground by all. And the way I know it's gaining ground is because it's being attacked by the left in just, it's nothing. Oh, it's, this is just a fringe group. And it's all the traditional things they say as a movement gains ground. Like, look at the Tea Party 10, 15 years ago. Has it been that long already since the Tea Party came on the scene?
Yeah, at least 10 or 15 years.
Wow.
I know.
But they went through the same thing.
Do you know what it stands for, by the way?
Something against taxation.
Taxed enough already.
That's it. I knew it was something like that. It has nothing to do with, it's not it's not a bunch of ultra right wing nutcases. It's just people fed up with being taxed too much. Anyway, so I just thought, I wondered if you think, this is a long way of asking the question. In Canada, we have people with Justin Trudeau on the stage, and I'm sorry, the idiots he has for cabinet ministers, everything from Climate Barbie to our immigration minister to you name it. Not many portfolios are well managed. And I'm trying to cut him as much slack as I can here, but almost on every front. Foreign affairs, immigration, defense, climate, or the environment. All these files are completely bungled and mishandled because he's got people in those positions who do not deserve to be there. It's not like he's taking people with some experience or at least some political experience and can manage that file. He's putting people in who only just got elected and have no idea how the government works. So there's a lot of that's out there, and I would imagine that there's a lot of frustration in the Canadian population about this kind of stuff, and it's not getting any better. So I'm curious. I think there is a hunger for this kind of thing where people can say, look, even if I don't become conservative, I'm done being a socialist or a liberal, because what they're doing is just insane, and I don't want any part of it.
Well, you know what I always say, there's nothing more intolerant than a dedicated liberal.
Those who preach intolerance, those who preach tolerance are often the most intolerant. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, no, I wasn't, but I don't know. Okay, Nick is trying to drink something. I try not to make him laugh too much because he's going to spit it out all over me.
Yes, that was. That's exactly how that would have gone.
Yeah, yeah. Look, there's. I don't think things are as bad as they've ever been. I think things are as bad as I've seen them in terms of the political, the level of discourse on public policy and politics. They're as bad as I've seen them in my lifetime. But, let's remember that the Americans fought a civil war. So things could be a lot worse than they are now. But I get it. People are tired of the mindless rhetoric, okay? I totally understand that. And I don't know if it means walking away from a political party, then, that's what it means.
Well, this is why I'm saying that perhaps, and I don't know how to start something like that, but this guy just said, you know what, hashtag walk away on Twitter, and people have taken him up on it. So if somebody were, because I don't even use Twitter. I never have. I have never.
But it's not just, Nick, you're focusing on the Democrats and Liberals and that, but, look at what's going on with the Conservative Party in Canada right now with Maxime Bernier.
Oh, yeah.
Who makes, I think, a very valid point. He juxtaposes the removal of the statue or the plaque or whatever it was of Sir Johnny Macdonald in Victoria, okay, with the dedication of a memorial of some sort in a park in Manitoba, in Winnipeg, I believe it was,
right,
to the founder of Pakistan. Okay, and he's going, okay, what's going on here, people? What's going on? We are throwing away our history, for better or worse. Sir Johnny Macdonald was not the nicest person. Okay,
well, he was no saint.
I guess he was no saint. I'm not a saint either. Nick, you certainly aren't a saint.
No, there's so. I got a long walk down that road.
Okay, so Bernier makes this valid point, and the fact that the Prime Minister and his people all are very supportive of this stuff. There's an element of, I have to tell you, there's an element of falseness about it. I don't really know when Trudeau talks about this multiculturalism and stuff like that. And I'm not against multiculturalism, but I don't necessarily buy that he buys it, that people buy it that much. So this notion that we're going to celebrate the founder of Pakistan. I don't know. So, but look at the price that Bernier is paying. Yeah. Conservatives saying, how could you be such a anti-immigrant? He's anti-immigrant.
Now, when I say conservatives, I'm using the big C conservative now, the party.
Right, the party members.
That's right. Have a very bad habit of eating their own. And if there's a lesson we could take from the other side of the aisle, is rather than devour each other and tear ourselves to pieces, circle the wagons and defend your brother conservative or sister conservative when they're under assault. Because, look, none of us are perfect. And
but I don't see what he said was wrong.
There's nothing.
I think he raised a good point. And I don't understand how when you say that we should be concerned about extreme diversity and institutional diversity, where we're actually paying and organizing our social services and our society around these silos that we're saying, the silo is good. Silo is good. Well, silos are not so good, okay? And if they happen naturally, they happen naturally. But the idea of having programs and spending money to keep individual communities, ethnic communities apart in a country like Canada, you bet it's staggering that we would do such a thing. And so he's just he's saying, why are we doing this? Fair question. Whether you agree with him or not, fair question.
Well, multiculturalism happens on its own anyway. Look at any city you want to in North America, and they have within them certain enclaves that belong to particular cultures. Right here in Ottawa, we have you've got I'll call it the Chinese district, for lack of a better phrase, Chinatown. You've got Little Italy. You've got all kinds of different places around the city where these people have settled. But the beauty of it is that they're not exclusive. If I want to go out for a nice meal, if I want to go out for Italian dinner, I go to Little Italy, because they have excellent restaurants, and I want to experience some of the Italian. If I want Chinese, the same thing. I'll go to Little China or whatever other cultural, the Greek, the whole Greek thing. That is to me a very healthy, natural multiculturalism, because we sample it without coercion. We're not forced. We don't have to pay for it, other than when we go and participate at a restaurant or something like that. That's voluntary. But we're not forced to by the government. The problem that Maxime Bernier is pointing out, as I see it, and I understand it based on what you've said and from what I've read, he's saying we got to stop forcing this stuff. Let it happen on its own, because slowly over time, it'll bleed out into the greater community. Like if you go into, let's say, Chinatown, right downtown in Ottawa, and you walk around down there, you see all kinds of people from all kinds of different races. And it's not just wholly Chinese, okay? Same thing with Little Italy. And as there's some intermarriages going to happen, things will eventually, over time, turn into a unique culture that is very heavily influenced, but not the same as the cultures they came from, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. These things should happen naturally. Communities assimilate, and people assimilate, and it's neither good nor bad. It's just the reality. But, when you make it a policy to create these barriers, if you will, put people into a silo, and you expect them and you pay them to continue to be part of that silo. And then you say, this is part of our strength. I don't really get that. That to me is just a cliche that really is meaningless.
It's poppycock.
So, again, then you get Andrew Scheer going out and saying, well, he doesn't speak on behalf of the party. Oh, okay. Well, I buy that. I buy that Maxime Bernier on this and several other subjects does not speak on behalf of the party. But I will say this, Maxime Bernier speaks on behalf of a lot of conservatives, small c conservatives and party members. Okay.
Right.
So he may not speak on behalf of the party, Conservative Party, but he does speak on behalf of a lot of conservatives. And I think that Andrew Scheer was making a very big mistake in buying into the whole alienation thing, where we're going to marginalization. We're going to marginalize Maxime Bernier, and we're going to marginalize the people who think he makes sense on this. I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I don't understand why nominal conservatives have to buy into the liberal rhetoric and go, okay, me too, me too. Justin Trudeau goes out there and goes, I'm a defender of multiculturalism. And then off goes Andrew Scheer and his minions, and they go, well, we too, we're defenders of multiculturalism. And in the end, we don't have what should be a serious conversation.
One of the things that has always bothered me, and I know I'm guilty, I'm guilty of the very thing I was just decrying of, tearing up our own, but the part that I don't understand is if you're going to mimic the Liberals on everything, then why have a party? Aren't you supposed to offer something different? Like, what's wrong with Andrew Scheer walking to the microphone with Maxime Bernier at his shoulder and saying, the Trudeau version of multiculturalism isn't what's healthy. Here's what conservatives would do, and explain natural multiculturalism and say that's healthy, that's normal, that is what we want. We just don't think that taxpayers should have to be forced to promote one culture over another. Natural. It's just like, when I was thinking of it. Forget that. That's not a good analogy. It's not going to work. But the bottom line is, be different. You don't have to be radically different. You just have to say, look, this is what the Liberals offer. Yeah, I'm watching the clock too. We got to go.
It's okay.
This is what the Liberals offer. Here's how a conservative government would be different.
Well, how about just saying, this is what it means to be conservative?
That would be nice.
Just be conservative. That's it. Just be conservative. That's all we want.
Amen to that.
Okay, we're going to go for a break. We'll catch you on the other side in a few minutes. Okay, I'm Joe, he's Nick, and we're in the home stretch in this week's episode of The Combat Zone. Welcome back, and I hope everybody had their opportunity to walk around. I know I did, because I needed it. I've been sitting here for about an hour, and Nick's watching me sort of move around and twist and all that. My back is sore, and I'm trying to get comfortable on these chairs in our Studio B bunker, and our Studio Bunker B. Now I'm starting to
Now
get
you're
mixed
thinking
up.
Bunker C.
Bunker C, yeah, Bunker C. See, now we're getting back into the oil debate. So 12 hours on the plane, man. 12 hours, Nick, on the plane. I was sitting in the seat. So what I did was I actually paid a little bit of money to get one of the bulkhead seats, right?
Yeah.
Or one of the emergency exit seats, so there's no seat in front of me, so I can stretch my legs out.
Yeah.
And for if you don't know me, guys, okay, I mean, to start off with, I'm a tall guy, 6'3", and I'm not a skinny guy. I'm a big guy, okay. So I have the bulk, and it's when I get on a plane, okay. So I got to tell you this: when I get on a plane, the first thing I do is, as I'm getting on, I nod to the stewardess or steward, and I go, "Hi, how's it going? Don't forget to send me the seatbelt extender." And I'm not embarrassed by it. I'm a big guy, and I could stand to lose a few pounds, but even losing a few pounds, I'm a big guy. So seats I don't fit very easily in those seats.
Well, if they start offering you wingtip seats, then you're in trouble.
Okay, but listen. So one of the on the flight from Frankfurt to Tel Aviv, I did not need an extender. It was very strange. I asked them for the extender. They brought it to me. I went to buckle up, and I go, I don't even need this. It didn't.
They had
it was
enough
very
belt?
strange. So I don't know. There's there's a joke in there about German airlines. I think, but a little bit too much Oktoberfest, maybe.
Das ist not Kerplunken. Yeah.
This is, oh my goodness gracious. There's another complaint coming.
Yeah, I know. We had a German workaway student, a very nice young lady, stay with us for about 4 or 5 weeks early in the summer. And you're familiar with the old game Kerplunk?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and that's the one, for those who you don't know, it's a plastic tube. You stick a bunch of skewers through it at all kinds of different angles, and you drop marbles in. And the game is called Kerplunk because sooner or later somebody's going to, and each person takes a turn pulling one of the straws out, and whoever pulls the straw that drops all the marbles to the bottom loses. So I just took that word and added an en on the end of it, and I said, "Das ist Kerplunken," which in my mind means it's broken. Well, I told that to her, and you should have seen her laugh. She said, "That's the worst German I've ever heard in my life."
I wonder if it's a real word.
No, I don't think so.
You could look it up. Google Translate.
Das ist Kerplunken? You be careful what you ask for. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
Let's see what comes
what
up.
Are we doing? Oh, he is looking it up.
Of course I am.
Okay. All right. What are we doing now?
It's Kerplunking.
Kerplunking?
Yep. Kerplunken German. Das ist Kerplunking.
What is that? What does it mean?
Well, let's find out. Let's see. Kerplunk. Oh, wait a minute. I got to go back. I clicked on the wrong one.
Oh, goodness.
Let's see. Translation of Kerplunk in German. Did you mean... Okay. No, not spelunking.
Oh, that's exploring caves.
Yes. Underwater with your hand looking for catfish.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a good idea. People have drowned doing that. I do not recommend. Okay, Kerplunken is their name. Oh, it's in German. I wanted the translation.
All right. Okay.
We'll have it for you next week.
Okay, so I don't know what to say here except for...
Is that for me?
Yeah. Okay, this is our stupid radio host segment.
Oh my God! I will admit I've never been awarded that award before, and with any luck, it'll never happen again.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Anyway,
Canada's flagship conservative radio show.
There you go.
Let's keep on saying it, guys.
Yep. Now,
all right. No, let's get serious.
Okay. AJ did make a good point in the chat room that I think we should spend a few minutes on. We were talking about how civics and history and things like that and governance aren't taught in high schools anymore and haven't been for a while, certainly not to the degree they have been. And he made the following comment: I also think we desperately need a course on basic economics and money management. And I said, oh, man, amen, brother, to that. So one of the reasons I think that governments get away, with the younger set at least, with running deficits and debts, is because I don't think kids today are taught what it means to actually run a budget. Or run it, in the old days, we call it running a checkbook. For those of you who remember a checkbook, where you'd actually have to write it out and then keep track of it in a book, right? So when somebody comes along and says, we're running a $315 billion deficit, most of us can't relate to that size of a number, but we know that deficits are bad because it means you're spending more than you have, okay? But if you're not properly educated in economics, it doesn't have the same impact because they just shrug and say, okay, so what? What does that mean? And they never bother to wait for the answer. So I think he's onto something here. I think that teaching basic economics, like how to balance a checkbook or how to construct a budget.
Yeah, I think that, first of all, I think that's a great idea. But the problem that I have is that I don't know who would teach it because, so few people really understand the idea of balanced budgets and the notion of not spending more money over a period of time than you're bringing in. And there's actually an economic theory out there that says that you can actually have perpetual deficits because if you stimulate the economy, the GDP grows, the revenue grows then, and you're constantly paying off the debt that has accumulated. I don't buy the idea of spending your way into prosperity. In other words, for every dollar that you take out of every dollar that you borrow is at some point in time a dollar that you have to take tax out of the economy in order to pay the debt plus the interest. Okay,
right.
So in the long run, in my view, it all washes. It comes out in the wash. It levels out. So, but having said that, you can run a low-level deficit perpetually because you're constantly, as long as the economy is growing.
Right.
If the economy grows at a rate equal to whatever the percentage of the deficit is, and I'm being very simplistic here, then you don't. It doesn't continue to accumulate and grow. But of course, we don't get into that. Nobody even talks about that. It's not real because we just continue to accumulate debt beyond what our GDP growth is.
Well, just think how many people understand even what $1 billion is. Never mind 315. $1 billion is 1,000 million.
Yeah, I don't think the size matters. I think we make a mistake when we focus on the actual size of the deficit as opposed to the principle and how. And I don't mean principle financially speaking. I mean principle in terms of the idea of running a deficit. Look, I believe in balanced budgets. I'm not one of those crazy people that says, okay, you have to have a balanced budget all the time. Though, you aim for a balanced budget. Sometimes you spend a little bit more. Sometimes you spend a little bit less. But over a period of time, your budget on the average should be balanced. Okay, but nobody understands what that means anymore, Nick, and that's really the problem. The problem is you get people going into government that don't have a basic understanding of economics, and then you get the pseudo intellectuals, the experts, quote unquote, that bamboozle politicians by saying this is the way to do it. You do it this way and that way, and that next thing you know, you get yourself into economic trouble. And of course, if you're running significant deficits when the economy is doing fairly well, that's a really big problem because you shouldn't be running any deficits ever when the economy is running well. That's the Keynesian. See, here's the thing is everybody forgets when they talk about Keynesian economics, everybody forgets that in Keynesian economics, you borrow money to stimulate the economy when the economy is going badly. But the flip side of Keynesian economics is that when the economy is doing well, you pay back the money that you borrowed. and so this idea of perpetual deficits isn't even Keynesian, okay? But even the Keynesian model didn't really work in the long run. And when he was challenged on it, his response was, "You're right, but in the they said in the long run it doesn't work." He said, "Well, you're right, but in the long run we're all dead." And that's not just anecdotal. Okay, that was the response, right?
Yeah.
And okay, well, yeah, to a certain degree, I guess that's right.
That's true, but our grandkids and children are still alive.
Well, that's the point, right? Is you leave your it is the ultimate taxation without representation. Why? Because you borrow money today, and your children and your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, who had no say whatsoever in the borrowing and the spending today, are paying that debt out of their taxes 10 years, 15, 20 years from now, 30 years from now. So if there was a great national emergency, like World War II was a national emergency, okay?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So, okay, I understand that. But, to borrow money because we want to have multiculturalism, okay? Amongst many, many other, or we want to encourage rich people to buy Teslas or whatever those cars were in Ontario. So we're going to give them an $8,000 or whatever the dollar.
$14,000.
Okay, $14,000 grant in order to go out and buy these cars. Okay, it doesn't make sense, and it's your great grandchildren and your great great grandchildren are going to pay for it. So they're paying taxes on our spending today, or they will be paying taxes on our spending today. And that just undermines what I think is the most fundamental principle of democratic government, and that is no taxation without representation. Because they're paying taxes on spending they had no say in whatsoever. And that's just fundamentally wrong.
And this is why I think that even at its most fundamental level, and this is why I think understanding, like, if you can get people just to understand, because you're right, okay, and there's no argument there. But going back to my idea of how much a billion is, if you can get people to get their head around, or at least understand that they can't get their head around how big that number is, then when they look at something that's 315 times bigger than that, they begin to say, holy cow, we're in trouble. Now, they might not have all the ins and outs that you do, but when you look at it, and I understand running a government is a long-term project, that it's different. It's a little bit different. There's a lot of similarities, but it's different too than running a family budget. But there's enough similarities. People understand income versus outgo. They understand bills versus assets. They get it that most Canadians understand that you can't continuously spend more than you take in and not have consequences.
Yeah, but I don't know that most Canadians really understand that now because, the level of debt, household debt in this country has skyrocketed to the point where there are a lot of economists now who are ringing the alarm bell, and they're saying, guys, this is a real problem. Now, I've heard arguments on both sides of that. Is household debt really a problem? Because a lot of that debt is actually in the money that's borrowed to buy the home in the first place. Yeah. Okay, fair enough, but people are addicted to credit, and they have to learn that when you use your credit card, it's not something where you spend the money and then you make payments. Your credit card should be, except in extenuating circumstances, it should be nothing more than a substitute for cash. So in other words, if you have $1,000 of disposable income in a month, then fine, put $1,000 worth of spending on your credit card,
yep.
Right? But no more than that.
Yep.
Your spending should not be your credit. You might have a $50,000 credit limit on your credit card, okay? I mean, I don't know. But that doesn't mean that you should spend $50,000. You should be spending no more than what your disposable income is on a monthly basis. And you pay your credit card off every month. And that's what it is. That's true credit. Otherwise, you get into this whole interest trap and it just goes from bad to worse. Government is the same way, but we don't really appreciate that because we're so addicted to credit in our society now. And, one of the things that I heard this with loosened credit in some of the countries that we're traveling in, that there are people out there that are really concerned about it, where personal credit has not been as available there as it has been in North America.
Well, I think there's also, you have to understand that when again, going back to young people, there's a certain tendency when you're young to be reckless, and not just in one area of life, but in pretty much all of them. This is the period of experimentation. I'm talking about kids, let's say from 16 to 25, okay? Because in that range, they go through the more changes in that, let's call it 26 to make a decade. In that 10 years, they go through more changes than they're ever going to go through in their entire lives. They're going to go from being a minor to being able to drive. They're going to be able to vote. They're going to be able to drink legally. They could fight for their country. They could do, home ownership, buying a car. All these things are now part of their world.
They can get high on marijuana.
They can even get legally high on marijuana. And I use the word legally loosely. But anyway, the point I'm making is, so it's not surprising that when people are young, they don't have the discipline developed yet. Discipline is like a callus, and it only works if you use it. And you can make yourself more disciplined by constant effort, or a muscle. Maybe it might be a better analogy. If you never use it, don't be surprised if you don't have any. So they don't discipline themselves in how they spend their money. So they go out. Believe me, I'm as guilty of this as anybody else is. When I was first in the Navy and they handed me my paycheck, I think in those days we still got a paycheck. It wasn't direct deposit. I can remember getting paid cash on board, in my hand, in cash. Yeah. So what'd you do? First thing you do, over the gangplank, down into the port, boom, and in 4 hours it was gone. And you had to spend the rest of the weekend on board because you're broke. Now.
But you had that. But the funny thing, when you're in the service, it's the ultimate safety net.
Yeah, that's true.
Because you could blow all your money and then head back to base.
And still have a place to live.
Back to the ship, and you still got a place to sleep.
That's
you still got a roof over your head, and you still got food available to you. So, in a sense, it's conducive to that kind of recklessness.
Yes, I agree. But that happens. It's not just in the military that happens. It happens all across the spectrum. Now, if you're if you've just stepped out into the world, you're in college, or you've got your first apartment, your first job, and you think, I'm going to have a party, man, the party to end all parties. Because young people, they want to have a good time. They're spreading their wings. And the next thing you know, they can't pay the rent because they blew it all. Okay, so they're learning these lessons. So they're going through all these changes. The problem is, in high school and in grade school, they don't have anything to fall back on, because today they're not taught about even, because eventually people will work themselves as they grow and mature, realize they'll develop that self-discipline they need. But if you don't have the basic fundamentals in your head to begin with, then you've got nothing to fall back on, and it's a pattern that continues itself the rest of your life.
Yeah, I guess where I don't agree entirely with this, Nick, is that I'm not sure that the habits that you're describing in terms of discipline and responsibility are classroom-taught things. I completely agree with the idea of having a civics class and learning about how our system of government works, how laws are made, all of that stuff. I think that's a great thing. But I think that part of what you're seeing with the I hesitate to use the term irresponsibility of society, but maybe that is the right term to use. I don't think that you can teach that in the classroom. I think it's more symptomatic of a breakdown in families, a breakdown in parental responsibility, where parents don't know how to be parents anymore. Well, and they model irresponsible behavior for their children, I'm not sure how to address that entirely, except to say that we should be able to talk about it. And then we've come full circle, because as we were talking about earlier on in the show, the minute you start talking about family values and the importance of having an intact family with mothers and fathers and all that, then people start throwing stones at you and going, oh, you're homophobic, you're old-fashioned, all this stuff. They don't see the consequences of the breakdown of the social order. And the social order can be restrictive, but, I think that everybody needs boundaries. So to the degree that boundaries are a restriction, it's true. But boundaries are not a bad thing. Okay? It's like a glass of water. Nick, you love cliches or you love metaphors, right? Water, a glass of water is nothing except for something spilled all over the place unless you actually have the glass to pour it in and it keeps it shape. You have to have boundaries in your life. Mm-hmm. You have to have discipline. And these are things that are not academic. They're not taught in school. So, yeah, okay, I sure have courses in economics, okay, but honestly, if parents are not modeling this for their children, if the children growing up are not seeing responsible behavior from their parents, and including saying no to themselves, that's parents saying no to themselves, okay, and saying no to their children, and learning to say no, learning to live within your means, and to live within your means on a positive note, that you're not looking and saying, oh, we're deprived and we're not jealous. I don't care how many cars Bill Gates has. We have one car. He has 32. We all still can only drive one car at a time. We've talked about this before.
Right. It's one of the great lessons that, because when I was growing up on the farm, we were poor as church mice. There just was no money. And it wasn't because Dad wasn't hardworking or anything like that. It's just that agriculture back in the 1970s in Essex County, down near Windsor, where I grew up, wasn't the quickest way to wealth. Let's put it that way, especially on just 72 acres of Brookston clay. That's a mighty tough way to make a living. And the point is that in it all, there was a certain sense of frugality. And his attitude was, if you can't afford it, you didn't need it anyway. And he meant if you didn't have the cash in your pocket. Like we would go to the co-op in Comber, 6-7 miles away, and he would need something. He'd get exactly what he needed, but only what he needed. And I knew there were tools that he could have used and picked up, but didn't need it right now. And sometimes that came back to bite him, but most of the time we managed to get through. So, and all that to say that by setting, as parents, setting a good example means more than just, making sure the kids wash their hands for dinner and that you do it too. It's in every aspect of your life, and not just economic. It's the moral side of life, the social, the spiritual, the financial, the health, all that stuff. It's a package, and that package has been broken apart. And people use this term compartmentalize to try to hide the damage, because there is no real replacement for the traditional family insofar as educating children for the struggles that life is going to throw at them. Because unless they see it in action in their own homes first, they won't know how to deal with it when they get out on the street.
Yeah, you're hitting the nail right on the head, as usual, Nick.
Which is unusual. Well, as usual, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, if you weren't hitting the nail on the head, you'd be hitting your thumb.
Yeah, well, that was probably more accurate to thumbnail. But you only do that
funny,
once, I'll tell you.
I never realized there might be a connection there. I wonder if thumbnail comes from that. I don't know.
I wonder.
No,
hit the nail right on the head. Yep.
Nick, we're coming up on 2 hours, and I just wanted to say it's really nice to be back.
So this means we can't talk about Omar Khadr wandering around Parliament Hill?
I don't want to talk about Omar Khadr wandering around Parliament Hill.
I don't want to talk about him at all.
Good grief. I mean, what? He was wandering around. People get exercised over this stuff. I go, okay, really? What? Who cares? So he was wandering around Parliament Hill. What does that mean? I'm not going to get too excited about it.
Well,
that's just me, Nick. I understand This is a big deal to some people, but for me, I don't. I'm over Omar Khadr.
Well, it's to me, it wasn't even so much about Omar Khadr. It was the reaction of the left about the lady who, pointed it out, and it wasn't so much Omar Khadr, but the security breach. The security didn't even know who he was.
Yeah, but what security breach? It's not a security breach. They don't. So even if they knew who he was,
terrorist.
For you, and you think he's a security breach, but he's been totally exonerated. We've paid him millions of dollars.
That is not exoneration. That is blackmail money. I don't care what anybody says. Anyway, topic for another day.
A topic for another day. So listen, guys, we're gonna let you go for another week. It's been great to be back here, Nick.
Nice to have you back.
I'm very pleased to be back home in my own bed, in my own house. With it's just you don't really appreciate how good we have it here until you travel around a little bit and you realize what the rest of the world, including the rest of the first world, has. So we're all pretty happy. Listen, guys, send us your comments at thecombatzone.ca. That's comments at thecombatzone.ca.
And remember, you never miss your tractor till the tire goes flat.
Okay, we'll have to get into that. You'll have to explain that next week, Nick. All right, take care, guys. See you next week.
Thanks for listening.